venues first, if that's okay.
In terms of where we play?
Right. And who makes the decision and what kind of input you can have?
So what kind of input I have? My input, the commissioner makes that decision, but actually he makes a recommendation to the executive committee. He does all the forefront work to negotiate, to have contractual talks with the universities like South Carolina State, Florence Civic Center when we go there in basketball. Where my role comes in is, I would call and say if they have an availability this date. If they do, then I just turn it over to conversations to him at that point. But my role really rolls in once it's been decided or just prior to being decided to find out if what they're offering us logistically we can use. For example, University of South Carolina, we know Williams-Brice Stadium and the space around it logistically, space-wise, it's great. But then the questions become how many locker rooms are available for the venue? Where do the teams change? If there's not enough locker rooms available on site, where do we warm up? Because we only have one field at that site. Where those logistics work with? And then typically that gets us involved with folks in their athletic department or in the athletic department of where we're looking at going, whether it be Benedict, South Carolina State, to put all those pieces together before any contracts are signed and said, yes, this is where we want to go. So there's a lot of back end on it. Every venue is different. I can tell you everybody we've worked with has done everything they can to keep the cost as affordable as they possibly can, even though, costs at some universities are on the paper very high. It's not the university who's setting those costs. I can tell you Coach Tanner, he's sitting here, he did everything he could to take the university's cost out, but there's some costs they could not control on their end. And I can we talk about money, I can pass it on to the president of the executive committee because that's where it falls into his wheelhouse with that group.
So basically it's a long process. Like today we had a subcommittee meeting a few minutes ago, right? And I was out, and that was part of the agenda today, was to talk about venues and things of that nature. So what we normally do is we'll tell the commissioner, hey, look, please look into these venues. And like Commissioner Whiskey said, that they'll already be something we already know that people will look into, right? So basically like today, we'll get some information from the commissioner. This is what the conversation is looking like. Hopefully we have a contract by next week's executive committee meeting. And we'll go into executive session for those part of the discussion because we do talk about finances and some logistics behind the contract. 9 times out of 10, we get into the weeds on, are we really talking about the money or the experience for the kids? And that's kind of where the committee has to make a hard decision, because sometimes we can make a decision that could be, we can take a bath on it, right? We can say, hey, let's just go here and play the game and know that we're not going to have a good revenue split with the teams and going to be in the red at the end of the competition and so on and so forth. So a lot of times we get into the room, we have to make a hard decision on, are we really doing this for the experience? Or are we doing this for schools to make resources to take back to their schools and their communities? So I will tell you, right now, we're really looking at, South Carolina State again, we're looking at University of South Carolina, we're looking at various different locations, and it always are hang-ups, that we have to try to negotiate through the contracts, right? So I guess I'm a little bit free to speak on. Like say for instance, right now, University of South Carolina is making some upgrades to their facilities, right? I think they're doing some suites. So in the middle of the conversation, we gotta say, is this something that they're gonna be able to help us come into and play the contest here? And what are the restrictions them being under construction, right? So those are conversations we have to kind of have to kind of make a big decision. One thing I'd like to point out is that the committee changes, right? So the thing is, from year to year, there are different mindsets and different groups and different opinions on the committee. So one year you might have, oh, we want to do X, Y, and Z, but if you look at the committee again, the superintendent rep might be different, the school board rep might be different. So a lot of times those votes swing a little bit. So the committee is a weird kind of outline getting down to the negotiating the contract and what actually happens. So I will say that the football one is probably the one that's probably discussed the most. When we get into the contractual matters, how much is going to cost us, those line items, what can be removed, what cannot be removed. And those are the kind of things we get behind the scenes and try to make sure we hammer out to make sure we get what the schools want. And we were at the committee, was at the conference 2 weeks ago. We did some surveys and things like that to kind of see how many people are okay with essentially no revenue share or less of a revenue share or so have you. And the results are pretty astonishing actually. But I would tell people that the thing that we struggle with is some schools really want that money at the end of the game. They want to be able to say, okay, we played the contest, we have these resources to go back to our schools to pay for rings and pay, for other things. The thing I counter argue is, hopefully you're not setting your budget based upon that metric, right? Hopefully those first 3 rounds, when the league is not getting the revenue share, you're taking some of that money and reserving it so that you can have some of those resources. If you're thinking that you're playing the state championship and all that money's gonna pay for something, you're probably mistaken. Like, it's not gonna be that big of a check. And most people that played it, it knows, like, if anything, a few years back, some people paid some money to play in the state championship. So, we gotta really talk about what is the best. Is it the experience for the kids, or is it revenue share?
And the other piece on the money end of it too is you realize, I think 3 or 4 years ago, the due structure changed in the league. It used to be the league took 20% off of every playoff game you played. I think 3 years ago, Coach Staley, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but the league stopped taking that 20%. So your dues on the front end of the membership went up, and the league stopped taking that money out of every playoff round. So now, when you're in that 3rd and that 4th round home football game or visiting football game, you're making 10% more than you made before because you're no longer giving 20% of it away. So people are making more. The opportunities there to make more in that 2nd, 3rd, and even the 1st rounds, even though some of you are traveling 3 hours plus, in those first 4 rounds than before. So if the revenue on the back end is smaller, then maybe the revenue all the way through was greater than what you would have gotten on the back end had you lost that 20% too. And then the last thing I would share with the venue stuff is it only becomes a topic after that event's over. After the conclusion of the event and people that have been there say, oh, we don't like that, or people getting that hot moment of about a month and a half, an emotional reaction or just a reaction to what they just experienced. But if I ask you all right now, would anybody in here, if I told you today you will play for a state championship next year, but it will be in the parking lot out here in Lancaster, will anybody raise their hand and say, I don't want that? Everybody wants the opportunity to play in the state championship. So once we've experienced it, that's when we have the problem with it. And that's when I go back to what I said earlier about making those decisions before names and faces are attached. You know, that's where the feedback comes in. Make the decision of what you want. Do you want the grand venue, great experience, big college environment, Power 5 school, bigger facilities, nicer facilities, or do you want the revenue check at the end because we could find a facility that could meet our needs to host the crowd we were going to have, but also the cost was significantly lower, but it came with less. It came with less amenities, it came with less opportunities, and then you got to think about the other side of it. What about TV? Contractual TV, you start splitting venues, will TV cover? Will reporters cover? You know, you got to think about those things. If you've got a 5A school playing at 7 o'clock here and a 1A school playing at 7 o'clock 3 hours away, and they're both from the same area, where's the media going? They're going to go to where more houses are, the larger school, right? Because that's where more people are going to buy the print, they're going to watch it on TV, they're going to read the stories. The smaller schools may get left out. And is that what you want for your kids or for kids at any school? So there are a lot of factors to think about other than what check am I getting when this thing's over.
Thinking beyond just football, but starting with football. Because obviously we've got championship venues and games in every sport. How can we raise the revenue for the actual expenditures? Like football on average the last 6 years has been roughly $100,000. And not patting anybody on the back, but we raised $100,000 at Chapman with the state and coastal state, Power 5 programs, hospitality tax, even somehow potentially, I don't know if you can, get written into the state budget somehow. Are there ways that we can actually get this expenditure, sponsors, covered? And so now we kind of get both. We get the great experience, but also with a whole lot less, revenue resistance.
I said in my brief, but this is my third, my fourth and final year, actually. So, but I would say in my 4 years, me and the commissioner have some conversations about sponsorships. What does it look like? I think every sponsor is different, and I think sometimes you get into some conversations where I was told through previous leaders in the position that some sponsors want so much to take away from the experience, from our kids, and it becomes more about the sponsor and more or less about the game. So like I said, what the committee piece of it is you got to get to the room and convince these people that's about to vote on it that it's the direction that we want to go. I think it goes back to, what the sponsor wants, what the sponsor wants to give you, and how they're going to make the experience better for the children. I think if you have a good sponsor that comes in and do that kind of stuff and says it, and they're going to have a real commitment to the experience for our kids, I think the committee that as it stands right now probably be someone in favor of something like that. If you can look at how you're gonna do it across all sports. I will tell you now, talking to some of the committee members, they're more about the holistic league, more or less than just football by itself. So sometimes, like you said, we get in the weeds on one thing, and then what is, I don't want to pick on Founders because we're in the back, but, what is Founders going to do for tennis, golf, track, that kind of stuff. They want to see if they can get everything encompassed into one, and that's kind of hard. Sometimes the sponsors kind of say, well, that tennis state finals at, at Columbia, at Casey and whatnot, it might not only have a few fans show up, it's a small experience. So the sponsorship piece has always been kind of a weird, interesting dialogue. We do get some sponsorship revenue money now, generated by, the name of the company is TPG. So they do some stuff for us as well. If we get a little bit of revenue from that, it's never been enough that we can say it's going to offset some of the costs. But I think it's always an option. I think it's more or less just, getting it out there and proposing. I would say that we probably could do a better job of probably putting it out there. We're looking for a sponsor maybe, instead of going out, saying they wait for sponsors to come to us, maybe we should go to them maybe more. But it's always been a little weird dynamic as far as the committee moves and shifts, who's values what.
Would it behoove us to create like a championship committee, kind of like we do playoff committee and things like that, that's taking in not just football, but all sports, say it's $250,000, whether it's state funding, whether it's, hospitality, tourism, whatever, that they're looking for this amount to help all the sports. And what you don't get, then obviously you got the, handle gate fees and everything else.
Well, we've got a marketing firm now called TPG, and it's very similar to what IMG Learfield is in the collegiate space. And they've gone from about a 5 to 6 state operation to about a 35, 40 state operation. And there's competitors, kind of like IMG Learfield are in the competitive space of the collegiate market. There's competitors for them. And ironically, our person who handles marketing for us came from working in marketing in that collegiate space, even at the University of South Carolina. I mean, he is the voice of Gamecock men's basketball and baseball on the radio. You'll hear his voice before you recognize his face. And that's what his charge is, to find sponsors like Founders, to find sponsors like other businesses to bring in, to endorse and to pay for league business. You got to remember, the league is a nonprofit entity. So to say we need to get money from the state, that kind of is going to violate the nonprofit part of what we're doing. So we're not operating on, we know we got X funds coming in. The only funds we got coming in that we know when the year starts are those membership dues. And that, again, was designed to kind of offset what we were giving up in the playoffs on the back end on average. Outside of that, it's marketing, it's revenue from state championships, and it's wherever it sponsorships, wherever else it comes in, and you're just hoping to be able to meet the budget each year. So we're not sitting here that there's a party that says, hey, here's $3 million, go work. But that's what that marketing group's charge is for. They know the marketing space, they're professionals in that business. They know what it should be worth. They can negotiate the contract so that the company and the league, nobody gets blindsided by what's in the language of it, and it's a partnership. And then, places like Founders, when they pay the money, they expect execution for what they pay for. And that's where they come in too, they execute. We don't have to show up as a league staff and make sure that whatever was in Founders' contract when they signed X, Y, and Z to sponsor this, it gets executed. That's what that marketing firm does. So that's a two-part animal they play.
Okay, good. Sponsorship.
Yeah, just some basic overlay, from a founder's perspective. Every high school that's in our footprint, you get a check from us, or your booster club gets a check from us every year. So we did the high school league for 3 years. It was not a value proposition for us. It brought no value at all. And that's the thing with sponsorships. If I'm giving you 50 grand, tell me what you're giving me. How are you going to promote my name, my likeness, my image? Because if I'm not getting business out of it, spending money like that, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to cut your check, and your check, and your check, which those checks we give out to individual schools, $500 million a year we give the high schools across the state. I think our money's better spent there than it is at a sponsorship level where there's a very limited viewership. And, you know, it's just, you've got to weigh that whole thing. What is the value proposition? If I give you 50 grand, what do I get? And that's going to be the challenge for Derek and his group, is to boost that value proposition and find somebody that's willing to do that. And if you're looking across all sports, you know, it's going to be tough. You know, we'll go back to what Coach Tanner and Clemson said. You know, you're in a very competitive nature at the college level. You've got to raise 20.5 million. Where's that going to come from? Boosters. South Carolina's a small state. You split it with 2 major universities. What are you doing? You're going back to the same people over and over. So when we negotiate our contract with South Carolina and Clemson for our university deals, we just say, hey, look, we're doing a contract with you. This is what we expect from it. If you give us what we expect, I don't care what value you assign to anything, but don't come to us for NIL. We do not play in that space. It's not going to work. Why? Because the NIL, that's an annual expense. And then you get to, you know, you're trying to raise money for this player, and then he's there for a year, then he transfers out, then you got people bitching about, you know, I gave you that money last year for that player, now they're gone. And it's going to trickle down to the high school level. And I think that's what everybody's got to be aware of. You know, when you start talking sponsorships and these types of things, there's going to have to be some parameters, some expectations, some limits placed on it. And it's not going to be easy for anybody. And it's very, very hard to justify a sponsorship without having a really good package of how are you going to promote my product, my services, my goods. It doesn't matter if you're a credit union, a log home, a car dealership, whatever it is. It just it's hard to do, and it's not an easy thing. And you know what we like to see, especially when we do sponsorships within our community, we want to see an accounting of those funds. How were those funds used? How were they done? Some people aren't willing to share that with you. And, you know, if I'm going to give you money, I want to know, how did you utilize that money to make a difference? And if you're not willing to share it, that's your business. But it's my business not to say I don't want to play those rules. So it's got to be the expectations and a partnership going in. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Just not going to work. It's going to be very, very difficult. You may find a one-off to do one year, but you're not going to have that. You're not going to have that partnership. You're going to have, you know, just a one-time pop, and then they're going to be disenchanted and move on.
How do I, based on this morning's conversation as well, how do I, or who do I tell, or who do I talk to about giving input for the venues for the state championship games? Because I called you on Wednesday before our game and said, this place ain't gonna work. I did that before we played the game. And I would venture to say that I wouldn't want to play in it again, even if you, well, let me change that. You told me to play in the parking lot, play in the parking lot. But that away locker room is not a state championship away locker room. It just simply is not. And I'm not want to get into specifics here, but the coaches that have been there can tell you, the people are great. But the South Carolina State is not a state championship venue for the experience we're trying to give our kids, nor did I make any money. So I didn't get either one this year.
So I've done it for 10 years now, football logistics. And I think I worked with South Carolina. I worked with Benedict at South Carolina State, and we did a year where at Benedict and Spring Valley. So really 3 venues. Every venue raises different challenges to it. You know, you said the locker room, visiting locker room in the state. Yeah, it's small. It's got every locker you need in it, but the way it's cut up is.
Guys in the shower.
It's got every locker you need, but the way it's cut up, it doesn't have the space possibly you need. Told everybody that going in, listen, this thing's got long haul, and a tiny spot. It makes it really tough. Now, when you go to South Carolina, great facility, great locker rooms. But here's the deal. You play in that sandwich game, what happens? You get off your bus, you drop your stuff in this room, go to the bleachers and sit, and then in 25 minutes, when that game's over, you're going to play. If you've never experienced the middle game, you've never experienced that. Because the first game, you're there for 2 hours, and the last game, you got in the locker room when you walked in, and you kept it the rest of the night. Because when halftime's over, the middle game, they're out because of the way their facility was structured. Now, they were great and gave them rooms to change and to leave stuff and take stuff. But you're talking about, Benedict was the same way. Halftime when the game's over, get all your stuff out of the locker room and go. And then you don't go back in, because the other team's in there waiting for you to get out. That's your state championship experience. Some people didn't like that experienced that. So now that we've moved to the process of it was one game clear the stadium, well, when you're talking about 3 days and people were already not happy with the cost of places for one day, 3 days wasn't going to be even smoother, but it gives you a better experience because before the game you're there, what, an hour and a half before? So you can't, what I'm saying is you can't, there's not a place that gives you a clean-cut experience and the financial revenue you want back on the back end. So you've got to pick what it is you want the most. We want a little bit of money and a great big venue that's got all the bells and whistles and it's fantastic, right in the dead center of the state. Okay, we got that. But now what are you willing to do to go there? That's the question of membership.
There's other teams, maybe they're not gonna talk, they didn't get either.
Well, but here's the thing, is that,
And I'm not blaming you, Charlie,
Is
and I know it's going this, I'm just saying.
But it's value though, like, 'cause I'm the principal of the school you played in, I didn't care about getting anything. 'Cause it wasn't important to me. I didn't care less. I paid to go to the state championship, essentially. I wanted my community to have the experience. So I think what happens is, we get into the room, it's like, everyone has their opinion on the matter, and it's about like buying a vehicle. I tell everybody, I like a certain kind of car. You like a certain kind of car. We're never gonna agree on the actual vehicle. We're gonna agree that we all gotta drive and ride.
Sure.
And I think we wanna play the game, and I think it gets to a point where that part of the conversation gets into the room, and we gotta get 9 to 8 votes to say that this is where we're gonna go and land. I just don't think we have a solution in our state that's gonna satisfy everybody. And I think that's the hard part of the discussion, but I think we gotta get to the best possibility for our kids. And I think that right now, when we put everything on the table, contracts, when they get in, all that kind of stuff, what we had, I was going to say, what we had last year was probably going to be, Cyclone State probably the best option on the table, with everything that was in front of us to get voted on. Now, someone say, oh, we can do something else different, but in that particular meeting, that particular deadline we had in front of us, we had to vote on, I think that was the best option that was going to give the kids the best experience. Now, once again, you still got to look at the money part of it as well, right? So people look at, the revenue share piece of it, another piece, and how we, go to one ticket, no ticket, and all that kind of stuff. So that's another piece of it as well.
Let me ask you, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I do hear parents and everybody, how can you play on a Thursday? That just don't make sense. If you've got parents trying to get a basketball too, if it's a 1 o'clock game on Thursday, hey, you're hurting the people themselves. So, and it goes back, there's other venues. Who goes out and finds the venues? Have you ever talked to like a committee like this saying, like we're doing right now, saying, where's a place that's fair on both sides, or if it's not centrally located, what's the advantage of going somewhere else? But the thing I hear is Thursdays, and families say, I can't get off of work at 2 o'clock or whatever. Why are we having to play in those situations?
I tell you want to get off Thursdays, we go back to 4 classes and 4 championships, and we can do 1 on Friday night and 3 on Saturday and be done with it in every sport we play. I had a question, and I know what you're saying,
I know
because
what
we hear
you're
it too.
saying, but I was in North Carolina, played at 4 of them.
At different venues, and that's what they
Right,
do.
we had, 3 or 4 games, started at 11 o'clock, you go to.
Yeah, and that's the other piece, we could do 4 games on a Saturday, we could start at 10 o'clock in the morning, but then somebody's gonna say, I'm playing my state championship at 10 a.m. in the morning, so and then we can talk about multiple venues, which we've done in the past. There was a time when I first got here, we were Friday night at Benedict for 2 games, and then Saturday we were 3 games at South Carolina. And then what happened is the small schools said, well, why are we at a small venue, why don't we get to go over here? Why aren't we on TV? Well, TV don't want to do 2 sites. They don't have the production teams to do multiple sites. So now, well, why aren't we on TV? At least put us on TV, don't put them on TV. So there's always that balance of that teeter-totter board of what the member schools want, where they want it at. I mean, could you do it at multiple sites? Could we do 6 sites on a Friday night across the state at various high schools? That's what the membership wanted to do. we could make that happen. But then what are we sacrificing for the experience of those involved, the communities involved, et cetera? So it comes into Thursday, it became an option. When we had Thursday night, and then it became, well, we're gonna have 6 championships. Well, we gotta go 2 each day to do it under the format that the committee has given to us to do it in.
So back to my original question, how do I get input into, who do I talk to?
You talk to your rep. You talk to your rep. That's what you talk to.
My 5A rep.
You talk to your 5A rep, and then the 5A rep, we take it back in the room and we give it out. The issue is more or less, I don't think, you know, like you tell me, hey, we look at different venues, I promise you I probably looked at every venue you looked at already too, right? And I think that we got the feedback in front of us and the contract in front of us. And what I tell people is over my last 3 years is that you would get told one thing from one institution or one location, and then when it comes to that fax machine and writing, it's completely different. And what happens is, you know, and that's what I got to utilize. That's what I sign on, right? So the commissioner sign, I sign, it's like, what we're agreeing to is what we see in front of us on that budget sheet. You know, nobody's not gonna charge for that. It's right here, black and white. So a lot of times, I have other, you know, superintendents and leaders say, hey, I talked to blank location about whatever sport, you know, and I'm like, okay, great. So I said, Commissioner, you can call and get a quote, and they would get it, and it's completely different than what, you know, what's in front of you. And then when we send Charlie out to go, you know, assess the facility to kind of see logistically will it work, you know, it's hard. And then last thing, talk about the media, like NFHS Network and different places like that, they only send it one crew to us.
I got a question about that too.
Oh.
Is that media worth the $400 I got paid when my people can just stay home, not have to travel to Martinsburg and watch the game on TV instead of paying the $15 ticket?
Is it?
See, has that even been checked? I mean, if it wasn't on NFHS, would the schools make
We
more
make
money?
more money? Good point. I think the enrollment numbers are down. I can tell you right now, the numbers are down in enrollment, right? So we're looking at, like right now, we're looking at basketball, right? That's the one we've been digging into a little bit. And the numbers, you know, for basketball have been going down, trending down. And that could be a reason, but you know,
I mean, it's nice to be on TV, yeah, that's great, right? But
It's
it's not like
experience.
I'm on ABC, it's not like I'm on flipping ESPN, I'm not the.
yeah, I think it's the counter argument, right? I mean, I think it may take away from, you know, what we do, but I think it's almost like we do all these Zoom meetings now too, right? I think it's almost a little bit of that too. But I think after COVID, we just kind of shifted into a new space on how we view high school athletics in general. I don't think one's right and one's, you know, wrong. I think it's just, if you don't do it, you're gonna get a little bit of backlash. If you do it, so you kind of play the middle. I think that it's, I would say having it probably gives you a better opportunity to reach a wider group of people. But I think in this day and time, if you don't have it on some type of network or something like that, I think we're working in the Stone Ages. We're going back. Every other state has it on some platform. That's right. I mean, I think it's definitely taken away. You know, I'm pretty sure there's some grandmothers and granddads say, you know what? I'm not taking that 2.5 hour ride. I'll just double click on here.
And I know Bruce wants to say something, but I want to interject really quick. One of the things we offer at football and I think in basketball too, is we give the school X number of tickets, a ticket link, and say every ticket you sell off that link prior to this date, you're going to get $2 back that nobody else is going to get. So if you sell 1,000 tickets before that link expires on whatever they've all become public, you multiply that 1,000 times 2, that's $2,000 to your school that nobody else gets a piece of, right to you. So to walk away and say, well, we got no check. Well, you had an opportunity to push that and to say, here's some check. Now, is it going to be a significant check? Depends who you are. How many of you folks buy it? You know. Also, look around every Friday night. What's the revenue at the gates like? Mr. Athletic Director, what's your revenues like compared to they were 10 years ago? Down. In a lot of places, they're down. People don't come. It's not what it was 25 years ago. So that's another piece of it is, how many people are going to come? You know, I think our Thursday afternoon game this year had as many people as our Friday night game. Yes, sir.
So Mr. Pearson just mentioned about the rental fees. So maybe, Charlie, you can speak on, are people wanting to host this, or are we begging people to host it?
Well, South Carolina State wanted to host it. Because what they like is they like people coming onto their campus and seeing their
So
campus.
do we have enough pull, power, finance or whatever to get them to renovate the facilities? Their visitor locker room is perfect for their visiting teams to come to play, because it's awful.
Yeah.
So Hey, visiting team, you get awful, ours at Camden ain't very good for visitors either, kind of on purpose, right? But the state championship game, and we were.
On record now.
What you said this year.
You come to me this year.
We were visitors also, and and y'all had more players than we did, but do we not have enough pull, or like, is the rental fee not enough, or we can negotiate, hey, let's do some upgrades? Because the stadium actually, I thought the stadium, the jumbotron, like, it was awesome. It was a little farther. I think the distance, like, if that was put in Columbia, it'd be awesome, right? It's not, obviously. But do we not have enough, and I don't know what the home locker room, you got home gym? I don't know what the home locker room looks like, maybe it's way better, but do we not have enough negotiating power to get them to do some renovate?
That'd be a commissioner question. I'm not involved in the negotiation of it, but,
I'll speak a little bit. I mean, so we looked at a lot of different things. I mean, we've looked at bringing in portable locker rooms. Like, there's a company that bring in portable locker rooms on these big 18-wheeler trailers, the kind of like they do for like movie productions. We looked at all those kind of things a little bit, because I brought it to his attention too. Like, hey, what we gonna do about this and this and this? So we looked at it, but the cost associated with that was hard. So we did talk about having the university maybe split it. So we've had some conversations about some of those things. Nothing just kind of fleshed out. But I mean, I think that the university, they tore out the end zone opposite the scoreboard. They had just tore out those stands. I think there's a building going up there. So I think they got a long-term plan of doing some upgrades in phases. I really don't know if there's enough push, them being a state school, the way their state funds are allocated for us to make a big push. They kind of say, hey, we're gonna keep coming if you start doing these things. But there was definitely some conversation in it, but definitely nothing to flesh out just because of the cost associated with it and kind of split the cost on it.
President Executive Committee, why don't you suggest that to the commission?
Man, I'll be out of here in about another 3 months.
I will say, doing the logistics of it, all the ins and outs of bus arrivals and where you park and working with the different groups. I mean, there's a girl at South Carolina, Megan Kennington. She was fantastic to work with. I mean, they made it happen to this. Coach Washington at Benedict was fantastic to work with. And then the folks at South Carolina State, we were working with their vice president and their athletics director at the same time. They were great to work with. But they all everywhere had a logistic issue that we had to come through, whether it was a facility logistic issue like the visiting locker room. If the biggest problem we had was the size of the visiting locker room and everything else was a great experience, then I can tell you that was only one issue at one place. In some places offered multiple issues, depending on when you played. Like I said, you played in that middle game at South Carolina, they tell you that was a logistical nightmare. They never felt settled till they got on the bus to go home. And you played a late game. And then I can remember one year at Benedict, Coach Brian Smith coming to me saying, hey, we're on the football practice field getting loose for our game. I said, yeah, what's wrong? He said, they're parking cars on. There's no more places. And they're parking cars on the other end, and they ended up making it work on one end. But so there's always something logistically that is a challenge. And we got to take the facility we have and say, okay, we've got to make this work. Which is why in that Monday meeting, I told y'all, if you're going to be in the visiting locker room, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge when you get there. Go ahead and wrap your mind around that before you walk in, and that's what hits you in the face. So even though it doesn't help, at least it's a heads up, Yeah. At least it's a heads up.
So I think Coach Walker's asking is, who do I talk to about locations? And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, my understanding is from Todd, that there were some straw polls taken in the meeting in March. Would schools be in favor of some other locations around the state?
Yeah.
And so my thing is with the guys in the room, Sparkman High School, we got a beautiful facility. We got a Whataburger, we got Chick-fil-A, we're convenient to I-85 and I-26. We can hold 7,500 people, we can get another 1,000 on the hill if we have to. 1A, 2A, 3A, our locker rooms are all the same, baby. First side, home side, guest side, whatever. That's how we roll. We're blessed. New school, okay? Would the coaches be in favor of a place like that? And we work those agreements out with our staff and our people. We hosted the first ever 6A band championship back in the fall. We had 15,000 people roll through campus at some point in time. No issues. So these are things that I think when you're talking about locations, Coach, the league is going to vote on what the league is presenting. I think I can't make that clear enough. Like, they're not gonna propose, this is where we're going and y'all gotta live with it. I mean, I was in those meetings, my first 5A role with, everybody's mad about Florence, all the basketball guys. Lane Fowler got in there and they talked about then all the stuff about basketball. But until you play the state championship, you may not have that perspective. So that's where in this room, we've got state championship coaches in this room. So there's a certain unique perspective to that. But we'd be happy to put our name out there. Some of those classifications that would love to come to Spartanburg. Or Dorm.
Sir, I agree, because I'm gonna make money.
Burns, yeah,
I'm gonna
Burns
make money.
coming. So,
If I'm not gonna get the experience like Mr. Pearson said, I at least want the money. And I'm talking like I'm gonna make it every year, and I know I'm not. But for those of you who make it next year, you're gonna want the experience or the money. You're not gonna wanna go to have not a good experience, and you knew it was coming, and then you look at that check a couple months later, and like, what the heck did we, what happened here?
Do we not explore Clemson because of the location? Because I've only played one of these, and it was at Clemson, and we got the great experience, and we got a massive check.
They didn't charge. I heard they didn't charge.
I mean, you know, they didn't, I mean, but is that,
Sorry, Coach.
is that, I mean, is it purely location, or is it other factors? Because their name never seems to come up, and there's this big, beautiful stadium there that.
It came up, I mean, it came up 3 years ago when I was in my first year on it, it came up, and we kind of fleshed it out a little bit, but since then, it's usually just been the location. I mean, honestly, just been location. So we've not made the commissioner request to do Clemson anyway. I've never got enough push that anyone say, hey.
Coach talking about Clemson, Kyle Richardson did a presentation for the AD conference, Charlie, remember that?
Yeah.
He said, we'll host it for free, y'all come in, we got family rooms, and then we never.
I think that was some one of the things Mr. Pearson was referring to, that sometimes it gets presented one way, and then when you get what it's actually gonna cost, on paper, it was a whole different number. And I think they were banking on it, the old way of kind of the Tri-County area up there giving them money to offset all their costs, and they no longer did. So then it became a cost thing, to take everybody to the northwest corner of the state. So, you know, a lot of issues, but it's every venue. There's tons of football stadiums in the state, but they all have something that comes up with what the why nots. I mean, the FCS schools, they may be hosting a game that week and won't know till the end of the year. And if you make that agreement, then you got to switch 3 weeks out. Logistically, you just found out you're switching to a whole other part of the state in 2 weeks. That's tough. That's tough on everybody. And then, you know, I think Coastal's got in their conference, if they're the highest rated team playing in their conference championship, they host the game, which is that weekend. If the college football subdivision expands, they could be hosting games on that weekend, potentially. Or not want us in there because they're hosting the next week to mess the facility up. So there's a lot of what ifs that we can't account for, and that's conversations that when Commissioner Singleton has with these universities, they're fleshing those things out.
Even like this year with the Hurricane and South Carolina State, it got real difficult because they were in a bowl game. That same weekend we were playing the state finals. We had to really get into that conversation again and revisit it. Like, can you continue to honor this contract? Do we, you know, it was some conversations around that as well. So it's always, you know, some logistics around it, you know, to honor it. I think that, but I think anything is, you know, doable, you know, as long as everybody in the room wants to make it happen. But sometimes it gets a little tough when you start negotiating. I'm not the question manager person.
So is the venue selected based on who gives us the best deal? Is that, when the decision's made, we're gonna play here, is it selected because that venue gave us the least expensive option, or?
It's honestly just how it's presented to the committee, and we getting that fleshed out. Like even this year, we took wrestling to the Florida Civic Center. It was not the best deal. It was not. I mean, we took a bath. I mean, we just, you know. So sometimes we don't take the best deal, right? We take sometimes the best experience. So this year with wrestling, the best experience was the Florida Civic Center. Then they're going down to Anderson. That's a good example right now. We're dealing with right now. How can we negotiate? You know, the next year we're gonna make some adjustments. We're gonna stay in Florence. They're gonna say, okay, Florence is a great experience for wrestling. Next year we're gonna make it work. So we're going to raise the ticket price, raise entry price, and now we know. So I would say that, you know, when we looked at the contract between Anderson and Florence, I knew right at the table this was a bad deal. But what I also knew was that the experience was going to be better for our kids, the way they presented the layout. So not all the time. Sometimes it's more or less, you know, how it's presented, and then we look at all the dynamics to it. And I would tell you, sometimes you get into the room and, half the room might be big on revenue, other group might be big on, venue, and then the votes get kind of split coming out of the executive session sometimes. But I would say it's not one way or the other. I would say that we've looked at some deals that are, we pick these venues that are not always, not always good, right, for every aspect of the negotiation. But sometimes we have to just make a hard decision. I mean, but it's not one way or the other.